HD, Sarah Kunst. She is the Cleo Capital Managing Director. Sarah, welcome to Bloomberg HD.
Thank you.
First question is, who are the Wall Street's biggest losers and winners this month? And what's your expectation from July?
It's been a really interesting month. We've seen a bunch of big downgrades, in ratings for stocks that are doing really well, right? Companies like Tesla, like Apple, like Alphabet, the Google company. And it's fascinating because they haven't really done anything wrong. They're not missing revenues and things. They've just been doing so well for so long that a lot of analysts are starting to say, hey, this won't go up forever. And so we're going to need to start to hit the brakes. And so it's fascinating that we're in a moment right now where doing well can actually play against you. And then certainly, I think the biggest winners were AI stocks. So, names like NVIDIA, names like Taiwan Semiconductor, that as there's more and more interest in AI, people look at the companies that are designing and fabricating the chips that you need for this technology, and they're rewarding them in a big way. And, I think that for July, I suspect it could be a slightly slower month. In general, in the summer, things slow down a little bit, and it feels like, the market's in a place where, there's not a lot of sort of fundamental news to buy and sell against. So we hopefully, famous last words, might be in for a slower month.
And coming to the crypto quarterly earnings, what are the main drivers for the positive plus crypto quarterly earnings, Sarah?
Yeah, I think crypto's had a really interesting run lately. Even though in the US, the government is really taking a hardline stance and suing everybody from Binance to Coinbase to some of the smaller private, crypto exchanges. The reality is that at the same time, the biggest banks in the world and the biggest financial institutions in the world are getting more into crypto like Bitcoin. And so, I think that the price appreciation in a lot of different cryptos, particularly, some of the safer feeling ones, I think like the Bitcoins of the world, has really been driven by the fact that, there's big institutional dollar interest there. And that makes it feel like no matter what happens to these individual exchanges, it's not going away.
Mm-hmm. And you also touch base on AI and artificial intelligence. Search interest is increasing. So how is this interest impacting on the market? Opportunities, risks?
It's been really fascinating because artificial intelligence, AI, is not something that changes overnight. When you talk to technologists who've been working on these things, they've been working on many of the same things for months and years, but all of a sudden, with the arrival of generative AI tools that are consumer facing, so ChatGPT, which is a Microsoft-backed project, or Bard, which is a Google project, it gets a lot more exciting for people. They can see it and touch it with their own hands. And so, that's driven a tremendous amount of excitement into the stock market. And so names I mentioned before, like, NVIDIA, like Taiwan Semiconductor, there's a lot of thought that SoftBank, the big Japanese conglomerate, is going to spin out ARM, which is another kind of similar to NVIDIA design, chip design manufacturer, that they're going to spin that out, and that we're going to see a huge IPO, either later this year or early next year with that company. So there's just a lot of interest. A lot of the rally in the last few months has been around this kind of newfound excitement that Wall Street has, for artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And since you also mentioned about the semiconductor, especially Taiwan, US and China relationship is right now, there's a tension going on. What do you think about the impact on the markets when we look at the US-China competition from also technology perspective?
Yeah, there's been a lot of saber rattling on both sides. I think the latest, is that the U.S. is renewing talks that it might end up, making it very hard to buy and sell semiconductor chips, with China. And I think that with China and America, we want the relationship to be good. The reality is it's been a little bit fraught for quite a while now, and it's stopped short of boiling over. And I think that to some extent, both countries are rightfully, distracted by much bigger issues like, Russia and the conflict in Ukraine. And so, I don't think that we're going to see relations get great anytime soon, but I'm optimistic that they can sort of stay in this détente. And, for Taiwan Semiconductor, they have been incredibly thoughtful about opening up, building out new factories. They're building a huge factory in the American Southwest in Arizona. And so, really just saying, hey, for a lot of reasons, we don't want to only have a factory in one country, in one part of the world. We want to diversify. And so that is definitely a bit of a geopolitical hedge, as well as, an ability to just sort of, I would say, harden kind of their supply chain in general, right? If there's a huge, hurricane or earthquake or something that happens in Taiwan, you don't want, your factories to be knocked offline for days or weeks. And you don't have as much of that when you have multiple factories.
Right. And last question, Sarah, what is your expectation from the next Fed meeting?
It's been very fascinating because the Fed has been incredibly consistent over the last year of making it clear that they're not happy with inflation and they're going to keep hiking rates. And, Wall Street really hasn't listened. And I think that's been true of central banks all over the world, right? Where, the European Central Bank, the UK Central Bank, all of these banks have been saying, we need to get inflation under control. And the consumer and the stock buyers and sellers haven't listened. And so I think that, we're finally at a point where the market is taking it seriously and understands that we will continue to have, rate hikes, at least a couple more this year. I think that there was a pause last month. There could be another pause this month, but, I think that we're in for a couple more rate hikes, before the end of the year. And it'll probably be early, 25 before we see any significant rate cuts.
Sarah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.